Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's speech in Cairo really embodies the rhetoric, actions, and policies of the Trump administration as we've come to know them over the past 2 years, and it gives us a sense of where we may be going in the next 2 years. And here we can see that there was an arrogance and a brazenness and abrasiveness, if not a rudeness, to Pompeo's speech that really reflects how the Trump administration has presented itself to the rest of the world and the American public. And this can be seen in several different aspects. The most prominent one and the most unprecedented one was Pompeo as a sitting Secretary of State distancing the Trump administration and the United States from the 2009 Obama address in Cairo. And in many ways, what Pompeo presented was a caricature of the Obama address. I mean, the caricature that you would often see in outlets like Fox News or in conservative newspapers and in the opinion pages. Now, what's also interesting about this is not just the refutation of the Obama address and the Obama administration's supposed policies in the region as they were presented by Pompeo, but Pompeo was also distancing the Trump administration from the Bush administration's so-called freedom agenda. So this was the democracy promotion aspect of the Bush doctrine that was adopted after the 9/11 attacks, and that was supposed to be applied to the broader Middle East, and if not the broader so-called Muslim world. So here you have Pompeo presenting a vision from the Trump administration that's both separate from the Bush administration and the Obama administration, although he only openly challenged the statements by Obama. Now, this can be seen, this abandonment of democracy promotion, most openly in the embrace of some of the most autocratic and repressive regimes in the region, including the host of Pompeo's speech, President Sisi of Egypt, who he openly thanked for recently overseeing the building of a church in Egypt. So that's another interesting aspect to the speech, but also not just praising Sisi, but praising Saudi Arabia, including for its catastrophic war in Yemen, which was presented by Pompeo as part of a containment of Iran. And that really brings us to the third interesting aspect of Pompeo's speech, which is the saber rattling toward Iran that has now been heightened over the past year and a half. So not only with the United States withdrawing from the Joint Comprehensive Agreement that was negotiated by Obama for Iran's nuclear program, but also the reimposition of sanctions on Iran. There's a lot of extra heightened rhetoric towards Iran, both overt and covert discussions of regime change. And of course, some of this is seen in different battlefield areas around the region, whether it's in Syria or in Yemen, or some of the saber rattling towards Hezbollah in Lebanon. And this, of course, also brings us to the fourth interesting aspect of Pompeo's speech, which was the way he presented the United States. And this was really also for a domestic audience, in which he talked about the United States being a force for good. Now, Obama also said something very similar in his 2009 address. And so there's still this idea of American exceptionalism that both Pompeo and Obama and Bush, of course, tapped into, that they wanted to present that the United States is not an occupier, the United States is a liberator, the United States is a force for good in the region and in the world. And of course, for Pompeo, unlike Obama, but in a very similar fashion to Bush, this was linked to his faith. And so that was also something that really distanced, in some ways, Pompeo from previous secretaries of state, was the open discussion of his Christian evangelical faith, in which he discussed that. And that was also his link with Sisi, as he saw it, was that some of these autocratic regimes have been protecting minorities, and in particular Christian minorities in the Middle East. And his claim that they're also helping to challenge the fight against extremists. So there are several different aspects here that I think are important and interesting about Pompeo's address, and give us an idea of where the Trump administration may be going next. But the most troubling aspect may be for a confrontation with Iran. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's address also demonstrates the emergence of hardline neoconservatives within the Trump administration. Now, there's been a great deal of turnover within the administration in its first 2 years, but we're starting to see the real influence of John Bolton as the National Security Advisor, Pompeo as he came over from CIA to State, to replace Rex Tillerson, more of their influence on the Trump administration's policies. And that may be seen in the next 2 years, although this is, again, very fluid. The speech itself may have several implications, but most importantly, it's really the embrace of these repressive regimes around the region, if not the world. And this has been embodied, and some neoconservatives would justify this by claiming that repressive regimes that have ties to the United States should not be viewed as those regimes which are enemies of the United States, but also have bad human rights records. So, for example, they would view Sisi's performance as different from Iran's human rights record. So this is, again, fairly consistent with hardline neoconservatives. The other aspect that's really connected here is this attempt, and I think it's where we also see these broader implications, is not just this attempt to contain Iran, but what appears to be an attempt for a push for regime change in Iran. And that we will see whether or not that actually plays out over the next 2 years. There are many different signals being sent by the Trump administration, including the withdrawal from Syria that appears to be underway, as well as the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So it's unclear whether the administration will attempt an open confrontation with Iran at the same time that it's pulling troops out of Syria and Afghanistan, or if this will still be done through economic sanctions and covert methods.